If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Oh, that moment when you realize Mass is through pretending like he ever liked you. There's been a bloodbath over at ESPN, and it's still going on. You know a network's in trouble when mass firings are the most media attention they've managed to get for themselves in years. The uncaring hand of Bob Iger is moving, and he's saying pretty much the only thing white media executives know how to say when they have to trim the bottom line: start firing people. Keyshawn Johnson is gone. Jeff Van Gundy, gone. Max Kellerman, gone. Even Jalen Rose. Well, to see him gone isn't tragic at all. I mean, was anybody watching that guy? Maybe you had some people who were hate watching him, waiting to see how long until he inevitably got canned. And now that it's happened, they can move on, having finally gotten some closure. But Stephen A. Smith is still there. I swear he's the cockroach of the white media. Even after the nuclear war, he may well still be around. He gave his now former fallen comrades a tribute, but if you think that the ESPN executives did not tell him every word to say and allow him to do that, in fact, even tell him go ahead and do that so we can pretend as if we're all busted up about this, you're a fool if you believe that. They told him to say it and he did. But his tribute sounded a lot more like a eulogy. And notice how nobody's threatening to leave the network in protest over this. No honor among thieves and no solidarity among vultures. This isn't the end, Stephen Smith said. Well, actually it is for a lot of people from ESPN. But he is right, though, when he says that he could be next. Though he's talking like some hapless teenager in a slasher movie, Jason's already killed some of the rowdy little teenagers at Crystal Lake, and Stephen the token Negro could be next. And by the way, I don't have any particular malice toward ESPN per se. I'm not saying that it's a good thing that you got some folks losing their jobs, except for maybe Jalen Rose. But I will say that I've been struggling throughout all of this to find anyone worth rooting for in all this. Now, Stephen Smith is basically begging for his job with what he's been doing. That's what this is. The language he's using is that black folks needs to be grateful to these white media executives for giving us a job. He says that his now former colleagues deserve better, but then when he says deserves better from what or whom, he says not from the white media executives who fired them, but from the times we live in. That's who he says his colleagues deserve better from. How much more morally cowardly can you get than that? He doesn't talk about the white media executives who are actually canning people. Instead, he talks about some amorphous, depersonified thing that you can't confront, can't call out, can't even drag them into a room. That's who they deserve better from. And how do they get better from the times? How do they get better from that? How do they improve that situation? Talk about taking a bold stand. He doesn't call out a person or a group or organization. He laments the times we live in. And in his case, this is an existential crisis. That's the reason why he's looking so nervous. He's been here before and he knows how this story ends. Oh, how different he sounds than just a few years ago. Because a few years ago, to hear Stephen A. Smith tell it, why, he had it all in one sock. Why, he had everything under control. He had figured it out. Now today, Stephen Smith is trying to put a different spin on it, saying that he never allowed himself to ever believe that he wouldn't get the boot. Well, why not? It's happened before. Though for someone who, to hear him tell it, kept in the back of his mind that this day could always come, he sure wasn't talking like that not so long ago.
You were in this uncertain space.
Yeah, the ESPN let me go. We had a contract dispute. I obviously thought I was worth more than they thought I was worth.
I didn't see that legendary swagger.
Right.
And I
It was gone.
It was gone.
It was gone. I was humbled beyond belief.
And then when you went in to negotiate the contract, that blew up, didn't go the way you thought.
That's right.
And nobody called you.
And nobody called me. Nobody. A decade ago, I was completely unemployed, living off of my savings.
Had you played the game wrong?
Totally. I was very confident, but more importantly, I was uninformed about my own worth. I got something very simple to tell you that I figured out that I think will work for anybody in the world of corporate America and beyond. I wake up every day with two missions in mind. How do I make my bosses more money? And how do I get some of it? Very simple. Why is that? Because if you wake up with that mindset, number one, the boss wants to hear what you have to say because they know that you're putting them first. And then they don't resent you trying to get some of it yourself. As a result, it forces or provokes conversation and dialogue between the two parties involved. You're listening to them, they're listening to you because everybody's trying to win.
Yeah, that's what Stephen Smith was sounding like before the ESPN massacre. He was tap dancing heavy on that one, wasn't he? He knows what those white supremacist media executives want to hear, especially from him. Massa, I get up every morning's only thinking about yous. He was already fired by ESPN back in 2009. So after that first brush with near-career death, he doubled down on the bootlicking. He wanted Massa to know his world revolves around them and them alone. He only has eyes and only has brains, such as they are, for them. He said that like he was dropping some real gems. See that? Like he's giving some real life advice. If you want to be successful in life, figure out how to make somebody else rich. That's basically what he said. And that was him performing for his white bosses. That's who the real audience for that pathetic little display really was. And he actually was dumb enough to say out loud that if you put an employer first, they won't resent you trying to get some of the money that you generate for them. And he has the nerve to say it like this line of thought is some new wisdom that he's handing down to the plebes. Well, it's not. It's the most obvious and foolish idea that an employee can have. Every job is about an employee trying to keep their boss from firing them. And as for finding ways to make the boss more money, since when has an employer ever wanted to hear an employee's input on anything? There are a number of traits that many CEOs and many supervisors, middle managers, and bosses have in common. But gratitude is actually very rare on that list of commonalities. Employers don't even want to pay people minimum wage. What kind of fool thinks that an employer isn't going to mind if an employee's trying to get more than minimum wage? This is stupid A. Smith's magical thinking here, and as we see, it don't work. It didn't even work for him. I guess it never occurred to him that his white bosses think that the best way for them to get more money for themselves would be to fire him and not have to pay that $12 million a year. Get somebody cheaper to take his place. Like most bootlicks, however, he wants to come off as the loyal pet to Massa. Problem is that for the white media, all their pets have to get put down sooner or later. How did he think that this was going to turn out? That's the problem. Chuckleheads like him, they think they're too cool for school. And yet it looks like he's about to graduate from the School of Hard Knocks. Granted, he was held back a few times, but at long last he may be about to get his dummy diploma. Not that he will have learned anything. And of course, because he's a bootleg, he's got to get profane at some point. And make no mistake, he's mostly talking to black people when he says stuff like, "Y'all can kiss my A twice." And I'm talking directly to the people in the industry who sat up there and said, "Why isn't Stephen A. gone? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few people at ESPN getting paid more than me. They don't have a #1 show. They don't have top ratings. They don't generate more revenue. And by the way, none of them are black. How come you didn't bring their names up? I wonder why." I'm talking to those folks, the critics in the media, or the wannabe media with the blogosphere and the websites. You know he's not talking to black people alone because no black person has the ability to influence his employment. But a number of those white sports writers and website owners are on very good terms with the people who signed Stephen's paycheck. Is it too early to say signed his paycheck past tense? Yep, nothing triggers a bootlick more than black people speaking their minds about them. That's the quickest way to get them to start cursing, hooping, hollering, occasionally become threatening. All the things they don't and never do when they're talking about these white media figures. Though some may well say that in Stephen's little tirade was also a veiled threat that he's being singled out to be fired because he's black, when other white figures at ESPN get paid more than he does, and they don't have a #1 show, etc. Will he do like Tiffany Cross-Eyes and Don Lemonade if he gets the axe? You could certainly read that into his remarks, but it wasn't courage or even indignation that prompted his comments. It was fear. The real fear he has is being separated from Massa. See, bootlicks convince themselves that their shameless scratching and shuffling is somehow smart, and then they give their sage advice, such as it is, to everyone else. They tell themselves that other black people just aren't as savvy as they are, that they're somehow geniuses and they found the inside track. This is what they tell themselves, and it certainly seems that way for a while, but when they inevitably get the boot in their behinds, suddenly they start talking differently. I don't feel sorry for any of these people. The white media uses so-called sports reporting as a way to indulge every kind of anti-black racism that they want. All the dog whistling and racist euphemisms, code words, blatant stereotyping, all of it under the guise that, oh, we're not talking about black people, we're talking about just this one athlete over here, or this one particular team. That's the lie that they've been telling since forever. But everyone can see when they make their remarks, it's the same kind of talking points that every racist bigot says about black people, and nobody's fooled. But then again, they're not trying to fool anyone. Everybody's in on it. It's clear as day what purpose sports reporting serves. It gives these racists in the white media a chance to say all the toxic racist crap that they can't necessarily say in the rest of the newspaper or the rest of the network's lineup. Will this have any impact on his radio show, podcast, whatever the hell he calls that non-televised stuff that he does? I don't know, and at this point it may not even matter. Whatever the white media executives at Disney are going to do, Stephen Smith certainly can't stop them. He can't exactly reinvent himself at this stage of the game either. So however this shakes out, he's stuck with it. The only question is, does Disney want to be stuck with him? I'm not going to be on watch to see how this turns out because I have far more important things to do than stand vigil waiting for this bootlick to finally get broken. Though I will say it's been entertaining to watch him squirm. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Hassan Mathis, Andrew Lewis, Brian Ellis, Gregory Franklin, and Nicholas Moore. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.